Welcome back to the Art and Science of Computer Technology. In today's lesson, we'll be covering Python built-in functions part 2. So the other day we went over all of the slides. So just to recap real fast, just so you can pause if you want to, or you can just go back and watch the original video. So those are pretty much all the methods for the built-ins. So here's the code, here's what the output's going to be. So I left out a few for various reasons, but there's probably about 90% of the built-in functions are still left in. So I'm just going to go down the list and cover each one by one. So here's the source code for the day. Scroll through that so that you can read ahead of time if you want. And you can always just download the source code as well, and then you can edit it as much as you want that way. So that's everything we're going to be covering today. So getting right in. So for starting off, we're going to create this class, define test class, define the init, self, ID, all this stuff. We've covered all this stuff before, so you can go read through that yourself real fast if you want. Pretty much there's just a lot of functions throughout the built-ins that require having all of this set up ahead of time, so that's why this is all here. So you can see that. I got the test subclass for subclass of test class, the attributes and everything. You could probably take out the passes by now. Test object, so we created a test class, test subobject, test list, and then yeah, so this is all just stuff that we're going to be using throughout this the rest of the source code. So jumping right in. Also on the left side in the terminal output, I kind of organized it so you can see exactly how it lines up. So here goes to over here and so on and so forth. So just a little bit of clarity. So anyways, ABS for absolute returns the absolute value. So we put in -9, it returns 9. For all, return true if all elements of iterable are true. So we created a list where everything is true, and then we printed all for all true list, and it returns true. And if we were to change one of these to false, then it should likewise change what you get back from all. So now it should be false. All is now false. So where are we at here? Okay, so return true if list isn't empty. So here you can see even though the only thing that it contains is false, it still prints out true. Bin converts an integer to a binary string, so we pass in 10, and then it'll print out, where are we at here? Right here. So if this is the 1's place, 2's place, 4's place, 8's place, then this comes out to 10 in binary, obviously. Boolean just prints out if what's inside of it returns true or false, and since this is a non-zero, it'll return true. Right here, true, even though it's a negative. Callable, return true if object appears callable. So see, we can call test object, and that one's false. And just because one of them appears callable at first, it might still fail. I don't know the exact specifics of that, but just something to be aware of. But most of the time it should work as expected. CHR returns a string char of Unicode number. So we can see that over here. And you can look up the Unicode number charts if you want to know exactly which number lines up with what. But here you can see we printed out 97, 98, 99, 100. So 97 is a lowercase a in Unicode. So that's why I printed that out. And then we just increased it by 1 each time just to make it for clarity's sake that you can see it increase ABCD. Complex returns a complex number. So I pass in 7 and 8, and it turns it into 7 plus 8j. Del attr is going to delete an attribute. So print test class.x is right here, and then after, so right now you can see that test class has the attribute of x, and it's 10. But after we delete the attribute, it should return an error of some kind, and sure enough has no attribute x because we deleted x. So go ahead and clear that out. Alright, dict is just going to create a dictionary. So here we created my dictionary, and then we assigned it platypus to the key of random, and then we just print my dictionary, and sure enough, the key of random returns the value of platypus. So dir without args returns the list of names in current scope. With arg, attempt to return attributes of an object. So I just printed it like this. So print dir. You're going to have right here, this is going to be the list of names in the current scope. And then with an arg, so I passed in this object, and then I'll return the attributes, and here you can see that it's got these attributes over here. So div mod is going to divide and return, takes two numbers, returns the quotient and the remainder, so I pass in 9 and 2, and it'll return 4 and 1, because 9 divided by 2 is equal to 4 remainder 1, so that's why we have 4 and 1. So this is the quotient, and this is the remainder. Enumerate returns an enumerate object, so I'm going to create this list right here, dog, cat, bird, and then we're going to take the enumerate and go over animals, so it'll return a tuple containing, pretty much be the number plus the value that you had in the list, or whatever your enumerable object was. So here 0 is dog, 1 is cat, 2 is bird. Eval, expression gets parsed and evaluated as a Python expression. So right here, just remember that you include the quotes. So 10 plus 10 is going to evaluate to 20. Exec is going to support dynamic execution of code. So you can do a whole lot more with this. I was just keeping the example simple for right now. So I'm just going to print executing, and here's the entire argument for exec. So it'll execute that code, and sure enough it prints executing. Float is just going to convert an integer into a float, so I passed in 10, and it returns the 10.0 for the float. Get attr is going to get the attribute, so you pass in the object, you pass in the attribute you want, so I passed in the ID, and returns 1. Globals returns dictionary representing global symbol table, so you can see all that. Maybe a little bit more readable if I go like that real fast, but yeah, pretty simple. Maybe about there. Alright, so we got globals, has attr, has attribute, true if the object has the given attribute. So right here, if test object has the attribute of name, it'll return true, or otherwise false. And sure enough, it has true, because if we go back up to right here, test object is going to have the attribute of name. So from has attribute, we're up to hash, it's going to return a hash value of an object, hash test object. So here's going to be the hash value of test object. Help is going to bring you into some kind of help prompt. So I had that hashed out because you'll see in a second. It's going to go like that. Welcome to the Python's help utility. And right down here, if it's your first time, I mean, you can read through all this. Yeah, so anyways, I'm going to clear out of that. Clear that. Hash that out. Alright, hex is going to return a hex number, so I pass in 255, because it's an easy reference, which will return FF. And if we go up to H, hex, sure enough, FF. So I think I might have covered in one of the earliest lessons about how you convert binary and hex and decimal and all that. If you don't know, you can look it up. But anyways, that returns hex value. For the ID, it's going to return the ID of whatever object you pass in. Int, and it's going to convert a string representation of a integer into an actual integer. So just to show here is they're going to be the type of 809, and then the type of 809 after we convert it to an int is going to return int, and then you can do the same thing with floats and all that kind of stuff. And obviously the float would remove the trailing at the end. Is instance tells you if the object is an instance of a certain class. So isInstance takes object and class name, and sure enough, testObject is a instance of testClass. IsSubclass takes first your subclass name and then your base class name, and because testSubclass is a subclass of testClass, that also returns true. Length is just going to return the length of something. So testList was 5 long. Locals is just like globals except for the local symbol table, so it's going to return dictionary representing local symbol table. And we can see that right over here. And what did I do with list? So list is just going to create a list array, and we've already gone over this 1,000 times over, so there's that. As for max, is going to return the largest number. So where are we at here? So here we passed in two numbers, 1340 and 23, and the biggest number is obviously going to be that one, that 1340. And then we can also pass it in a list. So I passed in test list, and it found the biggest number out of there. And that was referenced at the very top. It goes 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. Min is the exact opposite of max. Takes two numbers or a list, and then just returns the smallest number. So here we have min. Object is just going to return an empty object. It's going to be the base of all the other objects. Object returns a featureless object from object, and then just print featureless object, so just an object. Oct is just like hex, except that it's going to return an octal number from an int. So we pass in 1, and it's like that. And if I mean, it's the same thing. I could change it. If I change it to 9, then it should say 1, 1. But since I just passed in 1, it's just 1. But yeah, it's the same exact concept as hex, except applied to octal. Ord is going to be Unicode number from char, so the exact opposite of what we saw earlier with, I think, chr, where it took a number and turned it into a letter. This one we're going to take a letter and turn it into the number representing the Unicode number. So Ord 97 is A, and if you go back to look at where the other one was at, you can see A was 97, and then B, C, D was 98, 99, 100. Power is going to return something into the power, so it's going to take the first number and then whatever you're going to raise it to. So 2 times 2 is going to be 4, times 2 is going to be 8, so power for 2 to the power of 3 is going to return 8, as you can see right here. Print, we've seen that a bunch. It's just printing. There's a whole bunch of other options you can have, but I really didn't want to add that at the moment. And you can look that all up in the references. All of these have way more features than what I'm mentioning. I'm just basically covering, for the most part, some of the easier examples. Yeah, just covering the basics for now. Range is gonna return a range thing. So usually you gotta combine that with a whole bunch of other stuff. We already covered that earlier, so I'm just leaving it here just to show what you get when what gets returned when you type in range 10. RPPR, what does that even return? Some kind of representation. So pretty much just returns the object in some kind of representation form. And I think that one has a whole bunch of other options as well. Let me see real fast here. For RPPR, we have, and I think it's got some kind of opposite form as well. It returns a string containing a printable representation of an object. For many types, this function makes an attempt to return a string that would yield an object with the same value when passed to eval. Otherwise, the representation is a string enclosed in angle brackets that contains the name of the type of the object, together with additional information, often including the name and address of the object. A class can control what this function returns for its instances by defining a __ repr __ method. So that's pretty much what that does. See here. So reverse is gonna pretty much reverse whatever list you pass it. So here, or whatever you pass it. So here I passed it a string for ninja, turned it in, should just be ninja string. Called ninja list. So list for reverse ninja for I and ninja list. Rev ninja dot append to I, print rev ninja. So where are we at here? Where am I at here? Okay, reverse. So here we just had to go through. I'm sure there's an easier way. I was just yeah, I just did it this way at the time. Um, but pretty much we just go and one by one we just reverse the item. Round is just gonna round it, round numbers. So you can specify the precision you want, otherwise it'll just round it to the nearest int. So here you can see we passed it 10.111 without any other arguments, and it just passed and rounded to the nearest int. Print round, here we passed in this floating point number, but we specified we want precision 4, so it'll round it to the nearest 4 decimal places, and so you can see it dropped the 5 over there. Set, we've been over this one, just returns a set. So I passed in a whole bunch of extra 1s here, and as you can see the set's only going to contain 1 1 because you can't have duplicates in a set. Set attribute is just going to set the attribute within an object, so we passed in the object, the attribute, and what we want the value to be, and sure enough here you can see the test ID became 10 when earlier it returned 1. Sorted is just going to sort your list, so here it's 2, 38, see they're all in order. str is going to convert things into a string, so where are we at here? So we combine this string with this integer, but because it's converted to a string we're able to concatenate with the plus sign, so we just went 100, and you can see that right here. Sum is just going to take everything what you provided and it'll sum it. So I passed it this list, and wherever we were at with that list earlier, the numbers all equal up to 730. Tuple is going to return a tuple, so that's an immutable object. So here we pass in 1, 2, 3, 4, and tuple is right here, 1, 2, 3, 4. For type, alright, cool, so we're almost at the end for this. Alright, where are we at here? Type. We're gonna type. Alright, so the type of this is gonna be an int, type of this is gonna be a string, type of this is gonna be a whatever this, some kind of test object, however all this means. And then here we have type for the class is gonna have just class type. So that's what all of these are gonna return. I don't exactly know all the specifics off of them, but those are examples of what they're going to return. So a lot of times you don't even have to know the specifics of why it works, as long as it does work for whatever you happen to be needing it. And then if there's a case where it is critical enough that you need to know exactly why something does what, then you can go read the documentation a couple times or however, whatever, and then you can make sure you have everything figured out for that. Vars is just returns the variables of the object you pass it. So here's all these attributes. And then zip is just going to create a zip object. Let me see here. Zip list, zip unsorted list, test list, and print zip list. So it's just going to return that. And you should be able to actually, with the zip stuff, there's a way to return them. So it shows exactly what they are. I don't have them written down at the moment, but it's pretty much just dealing with a bunch of iterator stuff and just a whole bunch of for in loops. So yep, that's pretty much it. So for instance, if the unsorted list was like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then test list was cat, bird, dog, then it would turn something in the lines of like 1 cat, 2 dog, something like that. So anyways, you can experiment with that, read the documentation. All of this stuff is pretty simple. I just didn't feel like putting in the detail for every single one because you can see how long the list already is without adding all the details. So that's it for today's lesson. Thank you and have a